Dr. Campbell, how's your work going? A handsome man wearing a white lab coat looked up from his desk. His eyes focused on the police officer who had just walked into his office. He took a sip of his coffee. This was Frank, a close friend of his. What's going on, Frank? Why are you so formal today? The dead can't hear us, so, we can talk like normal. Frank smiled and found an empty chair to sit on. He looked at Tyler and noticed something that bothered him. How can you eat here? Frank asked, making a face that showed he was disgusted. Tyler just shrugged. What's the problem? Where else should I eat? This is my office. You want some coffee? Frank looked like he might be sick and quickly shook his head. No thanks, I'm fine. Tyler reached for a pile of papers on the table and handed it to him. Here's the report you wanted. Frank quickly looked through the papers and then relaxed into a smile. Thanks, Tyler. It's exactly what I thought. Now I don't have to hurry and we can chat. How's everything with you? Tyler laughed. You never fail to surprise me. I can't imagine how you'd talk to me if the report wasn't ready. I'm doing well. And before you ask, yes, I'm still single. How's that possible? I remember at the last party you left with the most beautiful woman there. I don't know, Frank. Seems like girls don't want to be with someone who has my kind of job. As soon as they find out I work with dead people, they lose interest. Frank teased. Well, that's your fault, isn't it? You could have followed in your family's footsteps and played the violin. But instead, you chose this strange job working with the dead. Tyler laughed, picturing himself on stage in a fancy tuxedo playing in front of a large crowd. But no, he loved his job as a medical examiner, looking into the causes of people's death, and he wouldn't trade it for anything else. Growing up, Tyler's family always assumed he would become a musician like the rest of them. Music was in their blood, and young Tyler was expected to follow suit. His days were packed from morning to night. After regular school, he would hurry to music lessons and then on to a private tutor. If someone had woken him up in the middle of the night and asked what he hated the most, he would have instantly answered, music. But he never told his mother, father, or grandmother how he felt about it. They would have been shocked. Instead, Tyler quietly fostered a love for forensic investigations and detective shows. In school, he excelled in subjects that had nothing to do with music, such as math, chemistry, and biology. His parents either didn't notice or didn't want to see their son's true passion until something happened that changed everything. When Tyler was in the 8th grade, already weighed down with numerous music trophies, a new girl joined his class. Even years later, he remembered how his heart had skipped a beat, then started pounding again, but in a completely new way. She was beautiful, almost like an angel, and Tyler felt he had no chance with her. He was skinny, pale, and always seemed to be carrying a musical instrument. The realization hurt, but Tyler was not one to give up. He spent a week watching the girl, learning about her, and finally gathering the courage to talk to her. Hi, Tyler said nervously. The girl looked at him with big surprised eyes. Hi? Can I walk you home? Tyler asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The girl laughed and looked Tyler up and down before replying. No. If a strong wind comes, it might blow you away, and I'd be responsible. And if someone tries to attack us, I'd have to save you. Everyone around them burst into laughter, and Tyler felt his face turn red. He ran all the way home, tears in his eyes, where his grandmother was waiting. What happened? Why aren't you at music school? And why do you look so messy? Tyler's anger boiled over. He grabbed his violin and threw it across the room onto the sofa, shouting, Because I hate music school, I hate music, and I'm not going to study it anymore. His grandmother grabbed her chest, looking like she might faint, and Tyler ran to his room, slamming the door behind him. From that day on, everything changed. Tyler refused to practice music ever again. His grandmother had to take medicine to calm her nerves, his mother sobbed, and his father stayed quiet, understanding his son's feelings. He knew what Tyler was going through because he had felt the same way when he was young. Even now, he would rather be fishing with his buddies or enjoying a beer instead of dealing with all the trauma. Eventually, after visits to a psychologist and many family arguments, Tyler won the right to choose his own path in life. He joined the swimming team and focused on school subjects that fascinated him, like science and math. He even started doing his own experiments in his room, living a life entirely different from before. His mother cried again, his grandmother scolded, but Tyler didn't care. even when he came home with bruises and a bloody nose. Music was now a thing of the past. When it was time to choose a college, his family gently suggested something related to the arts, but Tyler announced that he wanted to join law enforcement. His grandmother's mouth fell open, and it was now his mother's turn to take calming pills. Sadly, Tyler didn't pass the physical exam for the police academy, but he had a backup plan. He applied to medical school, which interested him just as much. It seemed like the women in his family finally breathed a sigh of relief, even though they still didn't quite understand his decision. A doctor is a very honorable and safe job, Tyler's family said with relief. But their relief vanished when they learned the specific field Tyler had chosen. He was going to be a medical examiner, a person who investigates the cause of unexpected or violent deaths. This was a far cry from playing the violin, but for Tyler, digging into the mysteries of death was an art in itself. He had found his true passion, a calling that resonated deep within his soul. It had taken a painful realization and a twist of fate to guide him there, but now that he had found his path, he embraced it fully. It was unconventional, but it was his. "You're lucky," Frank said with a hint of envy. "Sitting here in your kingdom like the ruler of the underworld. No one bothers you." Just then, a loud ring sounded in the office where they were sitting. "See, you jinxed it! Someone has been brought in," Tyler said, a hint of amusement in his voice. Frank quickly stood up and said goodbye. He hurried out of the room, his face showing concern. Tyler headed upstairs where an ambulance and a police car were waiting. A gurney was being wheeled out of the ambulance with a body on it. A paramedic approached Tyler and said, "Mr. Campbell, we need to find out why this young woman died. She's around 25 years old. I don't see any cuts or bruises, but she died suddenly under very weird circumstances." Tyler looked at him and nodded, his face calm and professional. "Great, I'll leave everything to you." The gurney was wheeled into the department. The paramedic left, and Tyler pulled back the sheet to reveal the body. Most times the faces of the deceased looked normal, but the touch of death always left a mark. Not here. The skin was pale and the limbs were cold, but otherwise the young woman looked like she had just fallen asleep. Tyler usually didn't spend much time looking at the faces of the dead. This girl was different. Her features were strikingly beautiful, almost perfect. Something inside Tyler's chest ached. He had a strange feeling of longing, as if he had known her and loved her. "She's so young and beautiful. If only she were alive, I might have found the courage to ask her out," he thought. His mind started to wander, imagining how she might react if she knew he worked with the dead, but he quickly pushed that thought away and prepared to do his job. Tyler looked at the girl on the table and felt a rush of bravery unlike anything he'd felt before. It was as though he wanted to protect someone dear to him, someone like the young woman lying there. Her serene and soft face made his heart ache. How could someone so beautiful have to die? She deserved to live. Her beauty was like a work of art. With a shake of his head, Tyler snapped out of his thoughts and went to prepare for the autopsy. He picked up the scalpel, feeling the cold handle in his hand. The body on the table no longer seemed like a person, but a puzzle to be solved. Tyler was used to digging deep to find the truth, even if it lay hidden. This was what his job required. He made a small cut, just an inch long, then jerked back in surprise. The girl's skin seemed to tremble. He leaned closer to her lips, but felt no breath. Was he imagining things? Grabbing a stethoscope, he bent over the body, listening intently, but he heard nothing. What in the world was that? Am I dreaming? He wondered, confusion clouding his mind. He was about to pick up the scalpel again when the body on the table twitched. The girl who had been pronounced dead inhaled sharply and opened her eyes. Her sky-blue eyes darted around the room in shock before landing on Tyler, who stood frozen, his face as pale as a sheet. "I'm cold," she whispered, her voice weak, her lips barely moving before slumping back on the table. Tyler's heart raced as he rushed to the phone, dialing a colleague in the emergency department. "Doc, hi, I need your help. We have a girl who was dead, but she's just come back to life. Come down quick." "What?" The voice on the other end was full of disbelief. Tyler quickly explained the situation and hung up, his hands shaking as he turned back to the girl on the table. Her eyes were closed again and her breathing was shallow. In a few hours, the girl whose name Tyler learned was Denise slowly came to her senses. Tyler, who had stayed after work, sat by her bedside, unable to leave her side during this mysterious incident. His heart went out to the stranger, especially since a dangerous substance had been found in her blood, causing her heart to stop. Any longer, and we wouldn't have been able to detect it in the blood, the doctor had told Tyler earlier. And it would have looked like a mere heart attack. Tyler finished the sentence, still amazed at how Denise had survived. Whether her body reacted differently or some unseen force protected her, she had miraculously woken up from what seemed like death. As Denise's eyes fluttered open, she softly asked Tyler, "Who are you, and what is this place?" "My name is Tyler Campbell. I'm a medical examiner. You were pronounced dead and brought here. I was about to perform an autopsy," Tyler explained, watching her eyes widen in shock. "How did I end up here?" Tyler was about to answer, but a knock at the door interrupted him. Frank entered, followed by 2 policemen. "You're just in time. She's awake," Tyler said. The doctor who came in with them spoke quietly. "She can't talk much right now, so don't pressure her or make her anxious. And not for long. We gave her sedatives. She'll fall asleep again soon." Frank nodded. "Yes, of course. My people are working on the scene. I'll just ask a couple of questions." They all prepared to listen as the situation unfolded. A few hours earlier, Denise had been working as a cleaner at a private wealthy residence. "Hey Carol, can you finish up here by yourself? There's just a little bit left. I'll go help the girls wash the windows," Denise had asked her senior colleague, a plump woman who nodded at her without pausing in her work. "Yes, dear, go ahead. Don't worry. Just take out these bags of trash." "All right." Denise grabbed the bags and headed to the yard, where others in the same uniform were busily maintaining the grand estate of one of the city's wealthiest individuals. They were tidying the yard, cleaning the garden, and keeping everything in perfect order. Denise had been working for the cleaning company for a year, but she still didn't know all of her colleagues. Usually she worked with just a few of them. However, this particular job was different. The client was preparing for a significant event, and he needed his grand home brought to a spotless condition as quickly as possible. Many workers had been called in to ensure the job was done swiftly. Walking down a narrow path behind the house, Denise turned the corner of an outbuilding. "It's a bit gloomy here. Nothing like the front of the house," she nervously said to herself, trying to shake off an uneasy feeling. As she approached the trash bin, a sudden shiver ran down her spine. Just then, her phone chimed with a message. As she looked at the screen, her eyes caught movement. Another worker, his upper body hidden behind a pile of boxes, was approaching. Only his hands were visible, clutching the heavy load. Denise tried to step aside to let him pass, but she was too late. They collided, the boxes scattered, and she felt a sharp, painful jab on her side. "Ouch!" was all she could utter before the world went dark. Her body went limp, her breath grew short, and all she could hear were the faint rustling of retreating footsteps. "Help! Please! I feel sick!" she moaned, struggling to find the wall to support herself. She took a few wobbly steps before collapsing to the ground and losing consciousness. That was all she remembered. "Did you see the face of that worker? Or do you remember any distinctive features?" one of the interrogators asked, leaning forward with intense interest. "I'm sorry, no. I didn't see the face, only the hands. But there seemed to be a black bracelet on one of the wrists. I can't recall exactly," Denise replied, her voice trembling. Tyler and Frank exchanged significant glances. "That's very important information. Well done. If you remember anything else, let us know. Rest for now," they advised, trying to reassure her. It was decided to keep Denise's survival a secret to avoid alarming whoever had attacked her. They needed more time to investigate. The next morning, Denise finally felt stronger. Tyler visited her again, patiently explaining the circumstances of their meeting. The girl was frightened and overwhelmed, still trying to understand the terrifying incident that had transpired. Her eyes welled up with tears as Tyler's gentle voice filled her with a sense of safety and compassion. "Your relatives must be really worried. Frank told me that 2 women came to see him. One of them said she was your grandmother, and the other seemed to be your aunt. Your grandmother looked heartbroken. What about your parents?" Tyler asked gently. "I don't have parents. They died a long time ago," Denise replied, her voice flat and emotionless. "Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to." Tyler stammered, mentally scolding himself for his lack of tact. "It's okay. It was a long time ago," she answered, her eyes distant, then asked, "So my grandmother came then, huh?" "Yes, but we didn't tell her much either, to keep the information from getting out." "Okay." Tyler looked at the fragile girl and felt a powerful urge to protect her. No, he wouldn't ask her about anything else, not until she wanted to talk about it herself. "Here's the thing, Denise. You can't go home for now, and I feel a sort of responsibility for you. Please don't misunderstand me, but it would be best if you stayed with me for a while, until Frank finds the culprit, and he will definitely find him. He's the best at what he does." Denise silently looked away. Tyler waited. She finally gave a slight nod. "Thank you." A couple of days later, the girl was discharged. Tyler took her to his home, handed her a spare set of keys, and insisted she call if she needed anything or simply wanted to talk. Then he went back to work. The workday seemed to drag on forever. Frank didn't provide any updates. Unable to wait any longer for news, a wary Tyler returned home in the evening. He opened the door with his key, stepped into the hallway, and stopped in his tracks. He inhaled deeply. The apartment was filled with the delightful aroma of freshly cooked food. He smiled broadly, thinking, "Who would have thought? I never believed my kitchen would see the day when something so delicious would be cooked in it." "Good evening," Denise greeted him simply. The guest and the host sat down at a warm meal. Tyler devoured the food with pleasure. Denise, a bit shy, smiled contentedly. "I wanted to thank you for taking me in. It's nothing special, just pasta with vegetables." "I've never tasted anything better. Thank you," Tyler said, smiling back. During the meal, the two chatted and learned more about each other. When the conversation turned to hobbies, the girl mentioned her love for music. "You play the violin?" Tyler exclaimed, his hand with a cup of tea pausing mid-air. "Yes. Is something wrong?" "No, everything's fine," Tyler smiled, his eyes lighting up as he ruffled his hair. "It's just, how shall I put it? I used to play the violin too, but unlike you, I found my calling elsewhere." "Wow, I can't imagine you with a violin bow in your hand," Denise said, her eyes sparkling with curiosity. They both laughed, enjoying the moment. "Why did you stop playing?" she asked, leaning forward to hear his story. Tyler's face softened as he recounted his journey as a failed musician. He described how he had once been passionate about the violin, practicing for hours and even performing in small venues. But over time, he realized that his heart was in medicine, and he chose a different path. At the end of his story, he chuckled and said, "The ladies in my family still can't come to terms with my choice." Denise smiled thoughtfully, her mind wandering to her own family. She was silent for a while, and then suddenly the words poured out of her like a torrent. "Well, it's good when your family wholeheartedly supports your choices. My mother was wonderful at that. She was always on my side," Denise reminisced, her voice tinged with both warmth and sorrow. Denise grew up without a father, who had died before she was born. Her mother worked tirelessly, sacrificing and striving to create a loving and comfortable environment for her daughter. One special day in her childhood, her mother took Denise to the conservatory for a classical music concert. The experience was magical, and it left an indelible mark on her heart. From that moment on, the little girl dreamt of playing a musical instrument. Her mother recognized and wholeheartedly encouraged her love and ambition. Denise had a natural gift for music, and she diligently honed her skills on the violin. By the age of 16, she was already an accomplished violinist, playing with grace and emotion. Then, tragedy struck. Her mother was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer, and the doctors only gave her 6 months to live. The devastating news rocked their world. "You must find your grandma. You should have family to lean on when I'm gone," her mother implored during one of their heartfelt conversations, her voice filled with urgency. "Mom, don't talk like that. You'll get better. Everything will be fine. Besides, our father's family disowned us. You said that Grandma cut all ties with Dad when you two married against her wishes. She was against you from the start," Denise replied through tears, her voice cracking with emotion. "Don't argue. There is no time. You think it'll be easy alone? They're still your only family," her mother whispered, her voice breaking with the weight of her words. Denise shook her head, embracing her pale, fragile mother. "Promise me that you'll get in touch with them," her mother insisted, her eyes pleading. Finally, her daughter whispered back, her voice barely audible, "I promise." As her mother's condition worsened, Denise summoned the courage to swallow her pride and went to her grandmother, Joyce Larwood. Joyce was a strong, successful woman who lived in a large house and ran her own real estate business. The reunion was awkward at first, but slowly bridges were mended, and Denise found solace in reconnecting with a part of her family she never knew. Joyce's eyes widened when she first saw Denise, so struck by her resemblance to her late son that she immediately recognized her as a granddaughter. The family connection was unmistakable, and the emotions it stirred were profound. "Please, help save my mom," Denise pleaded, tears in her eyes. "I need nothing else from you." Joyce's heart went out to the girl, and she agreed to help. However, despite all their efforts, the day came when Denise's mother quietly passed away. The girl's grief knew no bounds, a pain so deep it felt unending. But her mother's words rang in her ears, urging her to pull herself together and move on. Their relationship with her newly met grandmother was awkward at first, filled with uncertainty and unspoken feelings. When Joyce offered to move in, Denise hesitated, but then remembered her mom's wise words that they were the only relatives she had left. And besides, as she got to know her grandmother, she realized that Joyce wasn't as bad a person as she had been portrayed. Denise moved in with her grandmother, and over time, the two gradually began to grow attached to each other. Joyce saw how decent, educated, kind, and pure-hearted Denise was. Her impressive violin skills only deepened Joyce's admiration. The pair were on the path to forming a deep bond, finding comfort and understanding in each other that they hadn't expected to discover. But not everything was smooth in this newly discovered family connection. Denise's grandmother, as it turned out, was living with her cousin Jacqueline, who had shown up after her divorce. Aunt Jacqueline managed the household and enjoyed the full trust of the elderly woman in family matters. She was accustomed to being the center of attention and having control. But now, to put it mildly, she was not thrilled that the direct heir of Joyce, Denise, had joined the family. From their first meeting, she took an instant dislike to her. Jacqueline's eyes were often filled with suspicion and jealousy, watching Denise's every move. Her attitude created a tension in the house, a sharp contrast to the warmth that was growing between Denise and Joyce. Despite the strain, Denise tried her best to be polite and respectful to Jacqueline, understanding that she was part of her grandmother's life, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something was not quite right with her aunt. The family dynamics were complex, filled with love, connection, and underlying tensions. It was a new chapter in Denise's life, one that held promise, but also challenges. The experience of living with her grandmother was a mixture of joy and adjustment, and the presence of Aunt Jacqueline added an unpredictable element to their daily lives. "That girl's a con artist. She just appeared out of nowhere, aiming to snatch the old woman's money, and my naive sister believes her. She must be getting completely delirious." Aunt Jacqueline would fume in private, her face twisted with anger and suspicion. She badmouthed Denise at every turn and tried to turn Joyce, the mistress of the house, against her. She made life at home unbearable, always finding fault with Denise and skillfully pretending to be innocent when confronted by Joyce. Her tactics were subtle but relentless, and it got to the point that Denise would stay late at school or her violin courses just to avoid interacting with Jacqueline. Despite the hostile environment, Denise never complained to her grandmother. She believed that the older woman wouldn't believe her, and besides, she didn't want to cause her any pain or distress. She endured Jacqueline's bitter resentment quietly, her heart aching with the unfairness of it all. Finally, unable to bear the tension any longer, Denise moved out as soon as she was accepted into college. She needed space to breathe and grow, away from Jacqueline's constant scrutiny and scorn. After that, it had been about 5 years since she had been living an independent life. Having successfully completed music school, she played part-time in an orchestra and took other part-time jobs, such as cleaning services, to make ends meet. Aunt Jacqueline stopped harassing her when she realized that Denise had no claims on her grandmother's money. She seemed to lose interest in the young girl once her threat to the inheritance was gone. Yet Grandma Joyce still missed Denise terribly and hoped that her granddaughter would come back to live with her. She called her periodically, their conversations filled with warmth and love, but also a touch of sadness. You know what I remembered? The girl suddenly exclaimed, finishing her story, her eyes wide with realization. What? Tyler asked, his interest piqued. On the day before I was attacked, I got a message from Grandma. She had invited me to come to her house for her birthday and said she wanted to tell me something important. By the way, did they find my phone yet? Denise asked, a worried expression on her face. Unfortunately not yet, Tyler replied, his brow furrowing as he considered the implications of her words. A new thread of mystery was woven into their conversation, adding to the complex tapestry of events. Denise's connection to her family, the unexpected message from her grandmother, and the strange attack on her were all pieces of a puzzle that seemed to grow more intricate the more they explored it. Denise's eyes suddenly widened, and she sat up straight as if jolted by a memory. And also, I remembered something else. The wrist of that person, the one who attacked me, didn't have a bracelet. There was a tattoo of a chain on it, she stammered, her voice filled with both excitement and trepidation. Are you sure about that? Tyler asked, leaning forward in his chair, his eyes fixed intently on her. Yes, absolutely. I couldn't recall it before, but now it's clear, Denise confirmed, nodding her head emphatically. Tyler's heart began to race. This was a crucial piece of information. He quickly grabbed his phone and dialed his friend's number. Frank, come to my house quickly. I have something for you. Frank arrived within half an hour, his face showing concern. He listened to Denise attentively, asking her clarifying questions, making sure to capture every detail. When he was left alone with Tyler, he risked sharing his own thoughts on the matter. Do you think the aunt could be involved in this? He asked, his voice low and thoughtful. Let's not rule out any possibilities. Anything can happen, especially since the girl says she doesn't have any enemies. Well, except for her aunt, Tyler replied, rubbing his chin. Tyler pondered for a moment, lost in thought. How could such a good person have enemies? Frank gave his friend a teasing look, his eyes twinkling with mischief. Oh, a good person, you say? You like her, don't you? It's not like that, Tyler stammered, his face turning a shade redder. All right, but why not? She is beautiful, sweet, and plays the violin. Don't miss your chance, or someone else will quickly snatch her away, Frank chided, laughing at his friend's discomfort. Stop talking nonsense, she's got her own head on her shoulders. Tyler blushed, trying to steer the conversation back to the matter at hand. You better tell me what's going on with the case. Any progress? Frank's grin faded, and he became serious, his demeanor changing as he focused on the case. Well, where to begin? It turned out that the surveillance camera footage at the site of the incident captured a person in uniform who was carrying boxes. Unfortunately, the recording quality was poor, and they couldn't get a clear image of the face. Furthermore, on that particular day, the cleaning company had hired a few temporary workers due to staff shortages. This made identification even more challenging, as the regular employees didn't recognize each other. Frank described the complexities of the investigation, how they were painstakingly trying to narrow down the list of suspects and make sense of the scant evidence they had. The tattoo description might be a vital lead, something that could help them pinpoint the attacker. Frank had taken a trip to Denise's grandmother's house. After speaking with her, he was about to leave when a car pulled up and Jacqueline emerged, her face flushed with emotion. Hey, Aunt Joyce, what's the police doing here? Called Jacqueline, her tone a mix of curiosity and concern. It's Denise. She's gone, Joyce cried, her voice breaking as tears welled in her eyes. Hearing the anguish in Joyce's voice, Jacqueline quickly ran up to her and gave her aunt a comforting hug. A moment later, she let go and asked, her voice filled with dread. Oh my God, what happened to her? I don't know. She just collapsed at work, and that's all I know, Joyce sobbed, her body trembling with grief. At that moment, the man who had given Jacqueline a ride also approached and hugged them. Frank, who was standing not too far away, noticed the tattoo on the man's wrist. It was the same tattoo that they had seen in the surveillance video. A chill ran down his spine as the pieces of the puzzle started falling into place. He quietly said his goodbyes and left, his mind racing. Upon hearing the tragic news about Denise, Joyce had immediately canceled the grand reception planned for her birthday. But the night before, she had spent a long time in her office talking on the phone. It was Frank who had explained that Denise had actually survived. and was now under protection. He also told her that they had a lead on the person who might have committed the crime. Eventually, Joyce announced that the celebration would still take place. Her niece Jacqueline didn't know whom the elderly woman had spoken to or why she had changed her mind by morning, but the news delighted her. After all, her aunt had been hinting for some time that she would be handing over the business to her heir on her milestone birthday. The elderly lady had never mentioned any specific names, but there was little doubt in Jacqueline's mind. Since the granddaughter was supposedly gone, everything would naturally pass to her. Jacqueline's heart raced with anticipation as she dressed up for the occasion, genuinely putting effort into helping her aunt for the first time in a long while. That evening, the guests gathered around the large dining table, the room filled with the clink of glasses and soft chatter. Close colleagues and friends of Joyce were present, and the atmosphere was one of anticipation. However, the old woman seemed distracted, continually checking her watch and casting impatient glances at the entrance door. Jacqueline, sensing the unease in the room, decided to take control of the situation. "Aunt Joyce, everyone is here. Shall I begin the evening with a toast?" she asked, her voice filled with excitement. "Don't rush, Jacqueline. I'm waiting for someone else," Joyce replied, her eyes still on the door. "Who might that be?" Jacqueline asked, curiosity in her voice. "You'll see," Joyce answered, a secretive smile on her face. At that moment, the door to the hall swung open, and a couple entered. The young woman, dressed in a beautiful silver gown, was arm in arm with a tall man in an elegant suit. Their appearance caused a stir in the room. "Ah, here are my main guests," Joyce joyfully announced, rising to her feet. "Now we can begin." Tyler reassuringly squeezed the hand of his companion, feeling her tension. It was clear that Denise was nervous, and he looked around the room, noting various expressions. Joyce's happy smile, the guest's bewilderment, and Jacqueline's face, pale with shock. Then he locked eyes with Denise. She looked stunning in her dress, her long dark hair flowing down her back, her blue eyes sparkling with excitement and fear. "Well then, let the festivities begin," he said, smiling at her, and stepped forward, taking her hand. The room erupted in whispers as the guests recognized the young woman as Joyce's granddaughter, but among all those present, it was her niece Jacqueline who was especially shaken. Her face turned ashen, and her hands trembled as Joyce's announcement came. She intended to transfer most of her assets to Denise, her rightful heir. Jacqueline's fury erupted like a volcano. She caused a scandal at the gathering, calling Joyce a foolish old woman and Denise a deceitful manipulator. "Why won't you just die?" She spat at her aunt, her face twisted with rage, and stormed out the door. Outside, a police squad awaited her, led by Frank, his face stern and his eyes unyielding. He already knew that the man who had tried to kill Denise was Jacqueline's lover. The lover had betrayed Jacqueline, revealing that he had acted on her orders to eliminate Denise. As evidence, he had shown the incriminating messages on his phone from Jacqueline, outlining the wicked plot. 6 months after that fateful evening, the time had come for a joyous occasion. In a church adorned with white flowers, a beautiful bride in a white dress walked down the aisle. It was Denise, holding on to her joyful grandmother's arm, her face glowing with happiness. At the altar, her handsome groom, Tyler, looked at her with adoring eyes. The medical examiner, often seen as having an off-putting profession, was finally getting married. He had found a girl who not only accepted his line of work, but looked upon it with a certain reverence. She had once said to him that it was only because of his profession that they had found each other. In the front row sat Tyler's parents, his mother dabbing her eyes with a handkerchief, overwhelmed with emotion. She was thrilled with her new daughter-in-law. "God, my Tyler has finally found a wife, and such a beautiful one, and how she plays the violin, a sheer delight for the ears," she kept repeating after meeting Denise. Frank was also present at the wedding, and he was enjoying the celebration with his wife Stacy and their son Jake. His successful handling of the case had led to a promotion at work, and he was now the head of a department with the rank of lieutenant colonel. That evening, at his own wedding and for the first time in many years, Tyler picked up the violin again. Together with his new bride, they performed a touching melody that brought tears to the eyes of almost all the guests. It was a symbol of their unity, their love, and the beautiful journey that had brought them together.